Good morning, everyone. It's a rowdy crowd, especially this table over here. That's Blue Lion and Tom. So we have a pretty packed room today. If you do not have a seat, there's a bunch of them on that back right wall. So please just feel free to fill them into tables. And good morning. Welcome to the annual State of the State with the Greater Manchester Chamber. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Manchester Chamber, Heather McGrail, and we're so happy to see all of your shining faces this morning on a very rainy day. I want to thank the New Hampshire Institute of Politics for hosting us here today. I know we're joined by Joe Favazza somewhere in the audience. Where are you, Joe? There he is, standing up in the back. And also thank our sponsor, New Hampshire Healthy Families, for helping us bring this program to you today. It's a pretty special one, knowing that Governor Sununu is in his fourth term, and so I hope you saw in the invite that we tried to do a little bit different, that it's going to be a bit more reflective so that he can look back and share some of his most exciting memories when he looks over the collage of his 8 years in service for our state. So we have some different questions of a different nature for you in the question and answer portion of the program. But before we get to that, I wanted to make sure to acknowledge our board of directors in the room. The Greater Manchester Chamber Board of Directors really is phenomenal. If you don't know these folks, I'm going to show you them as they stand up, and we call their names and try to catch them at the end because they're all brilliant, wonderful leaders. So we're going to start with our chair of the Board of Directors, Matt Cookson. If you can stand up, Matt. Okay. And I will put you all out of your misery. I'm going to do roll call, and you don't have to clap until the end because there's a lot of them here. So, Vice Chair Trini Houghton of Ripple Effect Studio, Trini. We have a Secretary Ernesto Burden of Yankee Publishing, Ernesto. Brian Bicknell of Manchester Community College. Joe Favazza of St. Anselm College. Diane Fitzpatrick, Boys and Girls Club of Manchester. Diane. Oh, Diane got a few woohoos. She's the most popular. Alex Horton, New Hampshire Tech Alliance. Alex. Ted Kitchens, Manchester Boston Regional Airport. Now is the competition. Mike Licata of Eversource. Chris McCracken, Amoskeag Health. There's Chris. Oh. Jody Nizaka, Manchester Economic Development Office. Oh. Eric is never the quietest in the crowd. Pon Nittichin of City Year, New Hampshire. Scott Spradling of the Spradling Group, who we'll hear from very shortly. Tom. Love it. He's going to walk out. Just walk out. And we have Tom Sullivan of Sullivan Construction. Where are you, Tom? Thank you. Now we can applaud. Time to applaud. And last but not least, I'm going to introduce Scott Spradling, who you all know is an amazing moderator of these programs for our chamber, but also an amazing chamber board member, executive committee member, and chair of our legislative committee. So he gives a lot of time and energy to our chamber and really, by way, to our whole business community. So without further ado, I'm going to call Scott up to give you the lay of the land and get started.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was a cheap dig for applause, and I got it twice, so my bad. So we are running this morning's State of the State in a very familiar format. We collected questions from membership, and the way we'll break this down between now and 9:30 is that we'll invite the governor up to be able to say a few words about the state of the state and share his vision for this next year, some of his priorities, and reflect past on some of his terms here in office in New Hampshire. And then I'll sit down with him for maybe roughly a half hour or so and run through a number of the questions that are on your minds for Chris Sununu. So let me get right to the introduction. Many of you have never heard of Chris Sununu. I'll fill in a few bio points. He played shooting guard for the Celtics in the late 90s, invented the internet as an MIT student. So he's in his fourth term, has said he's not running for re-election. So I guess technically what we have to say here is all good things come to an end. He's been a good leader for the state of New Hampshire and a good friend to the Chamber of Commerce and to many of us here in this room. New Hampshire's a small state, and we develop a lot of personal relationships over time, especially this group. We're close-knit, we know each other well, we work together closely, and Chris Sununu is a member of that close-knit group here in Manchester and throughout communities in New Hampshire. He has tied the record for most terms served as governor, so I assume he'll ask the next governor for a special pass for like one extra day so he can be the winner. 4 balanced budgets in a row, led us through COVID. He's done a lot. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my high honor to introduce Governor Chris Sununu.
Oh, I got a whoop. All right. All right. Thank you. Let's be really clear. If you're a politician tying the record for staying the longest, that's not a good record, actually. So we try. Yeah, 8 years is enough. It's good. It's not too long. It's not too long. But if one thing I've been highlighting to all of our friends in Washington, D.C. is, they should all move along as well, like every one of them. So a couple things. I do want to do just a little bit of a state of the state, like where we are, because folks are asking and what we're seeing and where we're going. And I appreciate we're going to do the reflective stuff, which is always a little weird. I mean, I know most of you in the room. If not, I've taken a selfie with most of you in the room. So it's not about, I'll just let Scott ask those questions. But I think there are some really good things going on in the state. And again, I don't just want to highlight the good. I mean, I like the challenging questions, of course, as well. And I won't bore you. I'm sure you all watched the State of the State speech, right? Glued to your televisions? I'm just kidding. I hope none of you watched that, actually. It's a little bit boring. But, we talk about a lot of our great rankings and #1 in economic freedom, #1 in economic opportunity and personal freedoms. We had some cool rankings this year, like our prison system, our correction system, which actually traditionally was not in great shape for many, many decades, is now ranked there was one ranking that said we were the best correction system. Our roads, there was one ranking that actually said our roads were the best in the country. And I think it's just because when they come and test our roads, they come from Massachusetts to New Hampshire. And like the delta is it's like so starkly different. They're like, oh my God, these are the best roads ever. Because they've been like, bumping around forever. I made the joke, it doesn't mean we don't have potholes. It just means ours are nicer than most or something. I don't know. So we do have all these great rankings going on. But really and not to be boring, but it really still is the issues of the day, the things we have to keep our eyes on are the fentanyl and the drug crisis, because it's taking new form. It is not where it was in 2017. In some ways, I think the systems we put in place are much better, but in some ways, how it is transforming, right? It's not just fentanyl anymore. It's not just overprescribing anymore. It's really being driven out of the southern border. It's getting mixed with xylazine and tranq, and you have all these different aspects to it that have to be taken into consideration when you design your system. And we can talk about the doorway system, which, again, I think has worked very, very well. Not as well as it probably should have here in Manchester, to be blunt about it. Since day one, I think we've had kind of a rocky start. Catholic Medical took over. It got better. I think there's still a lot of ground to make up a little bit there. And then mental health, right? And again, when I was running for governor 8 years ago, we said this is the unspoken crisis, not just in the state, but in the country. And then you have this thing called the pandemic, which like threw gasoline on that fire, right? So a lot of the things that we started, thank God we started moving on things in 2017 and 2018, both Republicans and Democrats in a very bipartisan way to really change our system. Couldn't change it on a dime. More mobile crisis teams, more home response opportunities, more DRF beds in the community, not just into a single institutional New Hampshire hospital, which is our mental health hospital in Concord. And we started making those changes. Then you have the pandemic. Now we're really focusing, as it should be, on kids. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it really is true. This is all about kids. If you put your efforts on mental health, drugs, DCYF, all these things that revolve around kids, if you put your efforts there and give them a better path and them better opportunities, holy cow, does the rest of the system become much more efficient, much cheaper. I mean, everything just works, right? As you go down the road. Workforce, it's astronomical, and the data, bears that out every single time. On the mental health side, one thing I say is you got to get your system right. You got to know, and I'm going to go off tangent a little bit. I was doing a speech in Pepperdine University, which is beautiful. It's in Malibu, California, by the way. Holy cow. Like, that is a place to go to school. But it was all about healthcare and kind of what we were doing on healthcare, what we were seeing, how we interact here in New Hampshire. I was out in California, but kind of how our system works is fundamentally different than a lot of other places. And in many ways it's better because we're smaller, so that means we can be nimble. We're very economically successful, so it means we can be experimental. We can try new things. We can whiteboard old systems out. And you got to be able to ruffle feathers. You got to be able to tell the nonprofits, look, I understand this is how we've done it for 30 years, but we're not doing that anymore, right? And that gets some people charged up because coming to work the next day and doing the same thing is sometimes easy. But when you're dealt with really significant crises and significant problems that you have to change the system for the long term, you got to change the system. And we did it, and we brought them along, right? We didn't do it with a sledgehammer. We brought them along. We made sure we were more community-driven. I mean, one of the data points I talk to all the time is that was most stark. There's 2 or 3, but when I took office, we quickly we said we're going to be data-driven around the opioid crisis, and we found out the addiction rates in Coos County were 4 times that of Manchester, right? Because they had no access. They had like 0 access to any services, right? Because all the services were here. So we said, no, you got to branch those services out. And not just for drugs, but again, for mental health, for all these other co-occurring conditions that can happen. And charging and really challenging our agencies, HHS in particular, to, again, fundamentally change the way we've done things, be more in the field driven. So again, by getting that system right, it's allowed a couple things to happen, which I think are going to be really interesting to see where they go in the next couple of years. New Hampshire Hospital, we are building 25 new beds at New Hampshire Hospital, brand new wings there. We're adding the forensic hospital. We're getting it out of the prisons, which it should have never been in the first place, and putting the forensic hospital attached to our mental health hospital. We bought a whole new hospital just for kids with mental health, right? We bought and we now run and maintain Hampstead Hospital, which again has gone from a census of like 20 or so, it's up to 50, and we're going to keep expanding. We're going to, we have a private provider that typically we hadn't worked with before, a couple other options with private providers potentially coming down the road, which is really great. New folks want to be part of our system. That was really the key. If you're doing new things and you're challenging yourself and you're getting better results, folks that are in this world, like the social workers, the mental health workers, the nurses, the MLADACs, folks that are in that world, they're doing it, hey, they ain't doing it for the money, right? They're doing it for the passion. They just want to help. But they have choices of where to go. And if you're a gold standard of a system, guess what? They want to be there, right? If they're going to put all that effort, all that work to help individuals, to make their communities better, they want to know they're backed up by an organization in the government that's going to challenge themselves to always make it better, not just accept the status quo. And again, give them opportunities to grow and kind of, with their professional development, whatever it's going to be. And so we're seeing a lot of workforce. We're always going to be challenged losing nurses to Boston, right? It's one of the best medical hubs on the planet. That's an amazing opportunity for all of our citizens as well. But the challenge is always retaining nurses and doctors. What we're actually finding is, because of the high cost of living, because frankly Massachusetts, and I wish they weren't screwing it up so bad, but man, are they screwing it up. Nurses and doctors are moving here now, right? They're coming into our system, right? We just built there's a new facility at Tuscan Village run by partners now. Some of the mergers that we're looking at, again, consolidation of hospitals and healthcare is going to happen. That's just the way it's happened. That's just the way it's going. But the key for the state is to say, okay, we need to make sure the independents are protected. We need to make sure that big systems don't come in, eat up little systems, buy all the what do you call it when you go in that big tube? What am I thinking of? MRI. So, thank you. I couldn't get MRI. You win a Snickers bar back there. It's my brain. No, and I don't know much about MRIs, but I found out MRIs can be very expensive, right? And what happens is, and we saw in other parts of the country, one hospital would come to buy another hospital, and guess what? They'd buy all the MRI facilities first, all the specializations first, and then for a couple of years it would be okay, and then they controlled everything. So they'd jack the rates right up. There's no more low-cost alternative for anybody. And so you have to understand that it's not just one hospital system coming in. They can provide more services, better care. That's great. But if it's at a much higher cost, it makes it unfeasible for folks to access those systems, and it's not going to work, right? So making sure that we keep, in our smaller state, the independents successful, and those operators that want to challenge and create as much of a free market. There's no free market in healthcare. That's the biggest problem that we have in this country. But to keep as much of a free market as we possibly can with transparency of pricing and different options and opportunities, that's going to be really critical as we go forward. And if you don't keep your eye on the ball, those systems, those smaller systems, are going to get eaten right up. And the last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll do questions because that's more fun, but the last thing I want to say is as we go forward, and I'm not going to be here. I mean, I love this state, and the state's going to hopefully be in good shape for a while. But the key to everything is fiscal discipline, and I can't stress that enough. We are in really good economic times. We've created a system that I believe is very pro-business, streamlining regulations, getting rid of burdensome steps in the process. We're not perfect, but boy, are we better than pretty much everybody else. And by being that pro-business, it allows our economy to be strong. This is not lasting, guys. There is some tough fiscal times ahead. I really believe that. Will it be a hard landing or a soft landing? We can debate that. But I think by the end of this year, inflation is not going away. You know what folks don't realize is the federal government passed and authorized all this money, ARPA, COVID, all this, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. Our bank accounts in New Hampshire right now are really full because only about maybe half to 2/3 of the ARPA money has actually gone out the door. Right? It was designed to keep being spent through 25, 26 on infrastructure and roads, 27, 28, right? So the system was designed to keep this cash coming out. And as long as cash is coming out, inflation will be high, rates will be high, it'll be very hard for young people to buy homes. That's another one, invest in affordable housing, working like a charm here. It really is. Better results than even I expected. We've doubled the number of permits that we have on affordable housing in this state in just the past year. That's an amazing opportunity. Massachusetts going in the wrong direction. Vermont going in the wrong direction. I was talking to the governor of Vermont the other day. He's baffled that they're basically creating regulatory barriers where no developer wants to go in there anymore. So they don't have the housing, so they keep losing population. Massachusetts is losing population. It's actually really bad even for us. You need Boston to be a strong economic driver and an engine. But my job is to make sure, and the governor's job is to make sure that if and when the recession comes, and it's coming, we're the last ones in and the first ones out. That happens if you're disciplined in good economic times, if you're really smart with your dollars, even when you have the dollars, right? You got to be tight at all times. Because if you're not, you create a precedent and the hole gets even bigger. And the example is California, right? We have hundreds of millions of dollars in surplus here. California has a $100 billion deficit. This year, in 1 year, he's $100 billion underwater. They're screwed, guys. They can't. They really are. It's sad. They can't invest in mental health. They keep piling money into the homelessness problem without any changes to the system. And you've probably heard me say before, if you keep putting more tons of money behind a system that isn't working, you're just pushing harder in the wrong direction, right? And that's exactly what's happening in Los Angeles and San Francisco. And they're getting themselves deeper and deeper and deeper. They think they can buy their way out of a situation. Government isn't here to support the systems. Government is here to support the individual. That's how we get the best results. And if you keep focused on that live for your die thing, as I like to call it, you focus on how are we helping that individual, not how are we helping that organization. If you do that, then we're always going to be a little bit ahead of the game. But it's going to be tough. I think we have some tough times in the coming years. I think AI is going to be pretty cool. We can talk about that if you want. I think where that's going, I'm scared of AI. You should all be scared of AI. One thing I talk about a lot is for all your businesses, you're in banking, you're in healthcare, you're in schools, whatever, AI is coming. First, there are two things you really have to do. One, you better get your cybersecurity up to speed, right? Because if you don't have the cybersecurity piece, AI is going to eat you alive. Like they're really, United Healthcare, you guys hear that story the other day? One of the biggest, I think the biggest healthcare organization in the country, a massive ransomware attack. Nobody could bill across the country. It was a mess. That isn't just happening because there's a guy sitting in his basement anymore. They're creating AI modules to implement these attacks. So your system has to be super secure. The second thing you have to do is decide what you want to do with AI. And everybody will be able to use it, whether you make donuts or whether you're running the state. There's going to be a place for AI in everything you do, but you got to set guidelines, right? Ethical guidelines. We have some at the state level, and you're happy to take a look at those. Ethically, what do we want to achieve with this? What are we trying to achieve? Where are our limits and our boundaries? Because it's very easy for this thing to get out of the box very quickly. But as organizations, I strongly encourage you. The reason I talk a lot about AI is this. It's real. It's happening. The biggest advances will be in healthcare, right? I think you're going to see a cancer vaccine in our lifetime. Well, at least in my lifetime. I don't know about some of you gray hairs. I'm just kidding, just kidding. Oh, you're fine, Scott. Scott will be okay. He doesn't have gray hair. But I really do. I think we're celebrating, or I don't want to use the word celebrating, but really acknowledging Rare Disease Month here in New Hampshire. And we have a lot of kids out there and adults with really rare diseases, which means the pharmaceuticals are really expensive because they're so hard to create because nobody wants to, they have to be so specific and it takes so much time and research to do it. But with AI, you can solve the structure of a protein, which what used to take us, like 2 years ago, it would take us 3 years to do. We can literally do it in about a month. Right? So everything gets accelerated really, really fast with AI and in healthcare. Regenerative medicine, which Manchester is the home of regenerative medicine here in the country, huge opportunity. That's going to take off and skyrocket. So what's the result? I think we're all going to live longer. I mean, I really think life expectancy, it'll start here in America, is going to skyrocket. Now that creates almost problems, right? Because there's nothing more expensive in America than the last 6 months of life. That's really, if I may, the financial problem of healthcare. Right? The last 6 months is incredibly expensive here. Dialysis, incredibly expensive. Is anyone in the dialysis business? Good, because they're a bunch of scammers, and they are stealing our money. They are. I cannot stand it. I think it is one of the biggest scams in Washington, D.C. And so there's new innovative ways to do that. Home dialysis, what Dean is doing, all these different opportunities that are being created that are barred from participating. But with new technologies and with new innovations and with AI, a lot of this is going to skyrocket, first and foremost in healthcare. But it'll create some weird dynamics, which I think we're all going to kind of see where it goes. I don't know how I got on this topic. Well, I'm now talking about extending life and longevity across America. I think we're just here to talk about New Hampshire, but we are so ahead of the game here economically. I think this is where a lot of these opportunities are going to be, right? And Dean is a great example. What he's doing with Army and regenerative medicine right here in New Hampshire, that's different opportunities like that are going to keep sprouting up. And we're going to, especially if you want to be in the Northeast, we are definitely going to be a place where a lot of these businesses want to go, as long as we keep focused on a government that is super efficient and focuses on the individual and maintains our real priorities, not just our political priorities. All right, get over here, Scott. Get me off the stage. Am I supposed to take questions? What am I supposed to do next? But look, everything's awesome. It's New Hampshire. It really is. Look, I've traveled the country a lot. Been with Nikki, and I'll take questions about whatever you guys want later. Nikki, Trump, whatever. We'll talk politics. We'll talk New Hampshire. But I was just down in D.C. One more quick question.
Wait, did you want me here or not?
No, yeah. All right, let's do it. All right, ask me about D.C. and Biden and with all the other governors, and we'll get into all that.
Okay, let's start
great.
there then.
There we go.
All right, turn on your other mic.
Okay.
Toggle switch, right on the top of the doohickey there. There you go. Yeah, there it is.
There we go. All right, great.
All right, so what did you want me to ask you about?
I don't know.
Other governors and Nikki Haley?
It's a good story.
We can sit. We can actually. We scripted this. We practiced for hours.
Yeah, I know.
Getting this right.
So I was just down in D.C. and all the governors were in there for the National Governors Association meeting. And governors, I think I've said this a lot, Republican and Democrat, for the most part, we really get along. No one likes Gavin Newsom. No one can stand that guy. No one likes that guy. But
I have a straight face for this. This is being.
Other than that, no, really, sorry, Gavin. Goofball. So. But we're all there, and the governors really get along. Immigration was a huge issue. Everyone kind of agrees that something has to be done and all that. I totally forgot where I was going with this.
I don't know. You were talking about the other governors and Nikki Haley. Biden?
Yeah, so...
You'll have it.
All right, let's just...
Have a sip of coffee for a second.
I'm realizing it's being taped, so I get nervous. I never get nervous about that, but now I'm going to get myself in trouble.
All right. So we'll give you a second to think about that. So I was saying hi to my good friend Josh Rogers, who's with New Hampshire Public Radio, longtime reporter. Many of us know him, and I think he's redefined the title of what I'm doing right now. He asked if I was going to be the point of interface for this morning.
The point of interface.
Sounds a little AI-ish.
Sounds very Josh Rogers.
Very Josh Rogers.
Where's Josh? This is Josh's move. Give me this for a second.
Yep,
Josh will come up to me and be like, "Hey, Gov, how are you?" And he's just doing this, right? And the whole time he's got his recorder right here, like you don't know he's recording every freaking word that you're saying.
Josh.
So by 2019, I figured that out.
Well, I'm sorry this is going to be such a buttoned-up event this morning. All right, so let me start with an issue that is, it's one that has been, and let me get serious for a minute, bail reform. I want to talk about it because it's a little bit fresh, it's timely. It uniquely affects Manchester. It very much directly uniquely affects a lot of the people in this room. What I'm seeing with this debate is an outside-inside kind of perspective when I'm looking at it as a Manchester resident. And what I mean by that is it feels like there are opponents to the changes to the status quo who, in my respectful opinion, and I'll own this opinion, it feels a little bit more like a psychology class exercise and a philosophy debate than it does a content debate when the chief of police in Manchester says 1 out of every 4 arrests happening last year were people who were already out on bail. That's a really big number. That's a big problem. And the reason I say outside in is because when you factor in the homelessness situation in Manchester and throughout the state, we're the state's largest city. We're the ones that have a lot of the resources. People come to us as a bit of a magnet for help, but we have more people coming in than are people that we would serve for this population. So bail reform. Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for a city like Manchester?
So a couple things. I signed the bill. We don't want bail reform. We want bail reform, right? Because I signed the bail reform bill 2017 or 2018. And at the time, the police chiefs were on board and the police association was on board. I said, okay, if you guys are on board, we'll try this. It hasn't worked. It's been a colossal, it's one of my biggest regrets. We should have never done it. So the quick answer was, and folks on both sides of the aisle said, we got to fix this thing. It's not working, especially in Manchester. More than any other issue, the political, the lobbyists get involved, right? The ACLU, all these folks are massively involved, really, I think, pushing back. And I would say folks that have said, yeah, we're going to make these changes, and then all of a sudden they don't vote for the changes. And I'm like, what just happened there? Well, you know. To your point, it became a political, philosophical discussion, not what is happening on the ground here, specifically in Manchester. It has to be fixed. The legislature's had the power to do it. We've had 3 bites at this apple. They haven't gotten it done. And I'm not just blaming them, but I'm absolutely blaming them because I told them, you put any fixes to this thing, and I'm signing it. Any fixes. And they've put a couple small ones. They've nipped at the edges. But they really haven't done what they should do. Now, my hope is in this session, I think there's a couple bills with some good stuff that can fundamentally change. For example, if you're out on bail, you don't get a second, you don't get, or out on no bail, right? Because some of them are out on absolutely no bail. You don't get a second bite at that apple, right? We're going to detain you if you're out on bail. And there's folks that say, no, you can't do that. Well, of course you can do that. And there's been a lot of negative repercussions because of this bill that I signed, a year or two ago. But God, do we need to fix it? Absolutely.
So thank you for that. I think there are a number of people in this room that there are some real practical impacts in Manchester.
Huge.
So thank you for that pledge. I want to go back to something you talked about earlier, which is your Invest New Hampshire plan. Yeah. Affordable housing availability for Manchester and Greater Manchester, it continues to be a challenge. It's a sort of a good problem to have, but we don't have enough space for the demand that we have. But can you give us a little bit more of a painted picture of Invest NH and where we're headed?
Okay, so let's back up. Invest NH was a $100 million program that we put forward, really designed to hedge off inflation. Right, the inflationary costs that developers had to bear that would disincentivize them from putting something in the ground. We also, part of that program was also an incentive to the towns to say yes to developers, because too many towns were saying, no, we don't want that here. Well, now we're going to pay you $10,000 per unit to the town. Do whatever you want with that money to offset any of the costs. So you need new fire trucks, you need new police cars, whatever it is. If you think there's costs coming in, we can argue whether that's real or not. But we're going to incentivize the towns to say yes as well. We even did a demo piece because a lot of folks are like, look, we'd like to put new housing here. It's going to cost $5 million to demo all these buildings. We don't have that money. Okay, fine, we'll demo them. I'll pay you to do that too. The net result was, I think we doubled the number of permits on affordable housing. And so because we saw that impact so clearly, and it's been in Manchester, Concord, Lebanon, Portsmouth, it's been all over the state. Small towns, 5 units here, 10 units there. So we're really trying to design it so the entire state takes advantage. It isn't just Manchester and Nashville. It worked. We got them to put another $30 million in last year. I think we're going for another $20 or $30 million this year just to keep it going. But the point there is that because we can see clear results, we're doing it. We're doing it again and again. Now, I think they're going to tweak the system a little bit to make, because we tried it once, we had never tried that before. We're going to tweak some of the application process and some of the eligibility requirements a little bit. One thing we found is developers, I was going to make a joke about Arthur Sullivan because I know Arthur's here. This isn't Arthur, but it's not fair because Arthur does an incredible job and Brady Sullivan does a great job. But we had developers coming in and being like, yeah, we're going to put in 40 affordable units and a few market rate units or whatever it was, which is fine. And then they'd get the grant and be like, oh, by the way, can we just make that 40 units, 20 units? I'm like, no. So we've got to really hold people to not changing their plans last minute. But the key to all this is the localities. It really is. I don't believe the state should be in a place where we force permitting, statewide, you know, they have something in Massachusetts where basically the state can permit over on top of the town. The towns have to dictate their own paths. They really do. But creating those incentives, the best thing you can do in government is incentivize people to make the best decision, right? You know, someone said to me, boy, you have to get rid of all these bad politicians. Because I say in Washington, right? I say that all the time. They don't do anything. They're making all the wrong decisions. We have to get rid of bad. And I said, we're always going to have, I'll just say bad politicians. I used a bad word when I said this a couple weeks ago to Politico. But we're always going to have bad politicians. The key is incentivizing a bad politician to make a good decision, right? And there's ways to do that. We do it here in New Hampshire. We got 400 members of the House of Representatives. I'm not inviting all of them to my Christmas party. I'll tell you that. They're really good people. But but at the end of the day, what happened? Like one of my greatest accomplishments, I think, was getting last year's budget passed. 201 Republicans, 199 Democrats. And that budget had a lot in it. And it passed on the first vote unanimously. First time and only time that has ever happened in the history of the state. Right? And yet it was so close. And people say, well, wait, what happened to gridlock? I thought you guys were supposed to be gridlocked. I thought nothing was supposed to happen like Washington. There's always a way to get it done. Never let anyone tell you that the politics is in the way of actually getting stuff done. So again, something like housing. There's so many common areas where we do see and do agree that this stuff can definitely move forward. But housing is a big one, and if you keep it moving forward and you keep those localities incentivized in the right way, again, we're just going to keep kind of outpacing everyone else in the Northeast.
Another timely question that isn't necessarily, I think, going to be on your agenda, but there's a baton handoff to your successor. And I see Bob Baines is here, former mayor, former school principal, and he's now on the school board here in Manchester. So public education is obviously a big issue and a big budget item. The Conval lawsuit and this judicial ruling that's now been sort of pushed back on appeal. It's going to head to the state Supreme Court, but the bottom line is we have a judge in New Hampshire who essentially told the state they're not doing enough per pupil spending, and that the number has gone from, I want to say, like 3,900 to, he said a number that was just above 7,000 per student. So that's big dollars, big investment. What do you see coming from this?
Well, let me tell you one thing. That judge is a politically activist judge that I think has no place on the bench. I even voted for the guy when I was on the council. I could be more disappointed because it was all politics. That's all it was. It's completely impractical. A judge shouldn't be telling the state a dollar amount. That's not a judge's job. A judge can go back and tell the legislature, you need to find a better dollar amount. But the judge actually picked a dollar amount out of the air. That's crazy. We put more money into, I think we're number 4 in the country in terms of dollars into education in this state. And we have really one of the best education systems in the country. And the fundamental change we made, I'm getting all choked up. No. The fundamental change that we made to the education formula in the budget last year, I mean, Manchester alone is going to receive $30 million more a year. $30 million. I mean, come on, guys. To say that that the system is broken, no, the formula wasn't great, so we made major adjustments to it, right? And I mean, the old formula said, the way they wanted, the old formula said that we were going to count attendance, how many kids are in your system, which determined how much money you get, based on 2006 enrollment. That's how we were doing it. Guys, for 15 years, we were counting how many students you had in 2006. And then that's the money you got. And then some on top of it. It's like, well, that's crazy. So we fixed all that. So look, I'll be really clear. That judge made a huge mistake. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. I don't know what they're going to do, but I pray to God they say, no, this is crazy. This was just politics at its worst. There's only one answer to that, by the way. You all get a sales tax. And I'm not talking 2%. We become Massachusetts if that were to pass. Because the only way to pay for it is like a 5% sales tax or income tax, even worse, right? So, yeah, you want to become like everyone else? You want to stop being the leader and the gold standard in the country? Do exactly what that judge wanted you to do. Disaster.
Airport. Ted Kitchens is here somewhere. There's Ted. So the airport business, I know Ted pretty well. The airport business is not for the faint of heart. So congratulations on bringing in a few new carriers at this point. We just saw the headlines about Spirit and JetBlue not merging, so it sort of opens up, I guess, new conversations, new challenges. I see the airport as a gem for New Hampshire. I see it as an opportunity to not have to drive to Boston, but it's a challenging and struggling environment. I know Ted could give 30 minutes of what his day in life is like, but what can the state do to better support our airport and sort of maintaining that gem?
Well, Well, look, I mean, Ted's great, and I think he's done a great job. The whole industry, as you said, is just kind of in flux. Yeah. A lot of these smaller airports, around the hubs are having trouble for various reasons. We kind of do our part in terms of making sure that most of the money that we put into the airport is from the feds, right? You shouldn't give the state much credit for that. I think we put our 5% in. The feds provide 95%. But we all see it, right? We see that empty terminal, that beautiful terminal that was built, and it's empty. We want that filled with flights. We want more people going. What can the state, honestly, Ted, what can we do? I mean, I really mean that sincerely. We try to be supportive when new airlines come in. I've been on the phone with CEOs of airlines before, and when we got some of those coming in. People have to understand that why folks in New Hampshire fly is very different than why folks in New York might fly or folks in Dallas might fly, right? So, I think Ted did a great job at getting flights to Florida because we tend to have a lot of snowbirds, and there's an opportunity there. Well, that works if folks are actually traveling and taking their vacations, and the economy is strong. When the economy goes down and if things start softening, as interest rates stay high, unfortunately, that's just going to have a lot of impact on kind of Wall Street and Main Street, and therefore, well, how's it going to affect our customers versus other customers? So it's a unique situation in that, you got to be unique to Manchester. But, just kind of clearing a regulatory path and being helpful to drive the message and the advertising and all that sort of thing, and the opportunity that airport creates. I mean, who goes to Manchester Airport and goes, oh, that sucked? That was great. I mean, it's great. It really is a great experience every single time. So I think just messaging and getting that out as best we can.
All right, perfect. So economic development is obviously a key piece of the Chamber, our mission, and of the day-to-day existence of the folks in this room. Yeah. From your experience, and you've had really some unique opportunities now to sort of travel as governor and interact with different states and different leadership groups, and I mean, you've been out and about. Any advice that you have in terms of economic development of what this group needs to be doing?
Save your cash. I really mean
save your cash.
Yeah, I mean, look, so two things. Let's talk short term. I think there is a slowdown in the economy coming. Everyone has to figure out, what that's going to mean. I think discretionary income is going to slow down. The fact that local banks are having a harder. I mean, local banks want to keep lending to a strong economy. That's great, but a lot of our local banks. I was with the bankers the other day. They're having trouble borrowing from Wall Street because the rates are so high, right? So, what's the point of borrowing at 5% if I have to lend it out competitively at 4% here? The bank is losing on every transaction, right? So that in itself is kind of crunching. I think making sure our local banks are strong is really important. We're trying to put more of our savings, more of our cash into local banks so they can kind of use that as collateral to put out more loans as much as we possibly can. We're changing our formulas to do that. But I think there's opportunities if you're a business. Look to what's happening in Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts. And I don't mean to keep picking on them, but this is just the reality. There's opportunity there, right? Because they're going to struggle economically more than we are. Their border businesses are going to struggle more. They have more regulatory burdens on them. So if there's a way to get into those markets, and kind of take advantage of that, I think there's a way to do that. Now you have to play by their rules, which is really tough. I mean, I know guys that have been franchisees of fast food in Massachusetts for decades. Family business, like decades and decades. They're out. They've sold all their stores in Massachusetts. They won't do business there anymore in the fast food world because of not just minimum wage laws, but the new scheduling rules, the new permitting requirements, all that kind of stuff. They've given up a huge portion of their family business because it's not economical anymore. I mean, the fast food chains in New York are getting crushed. Like if you're in a city, a lot of those locations just can't survive. There's opportunity there for a lot of our businesses. But a downturn is coming. There's no question about it. If you're on, I think supply side is going to get a little better over time. If you're waiting for chips and technology to be made through the CHIPS Act, that's not going to happen for quite a few years, but it will happen eventually. And understand that I think there's still a huge opportunity with international markets, especially for us, Ireland, England, Israel. Well, with the war going on in Israel, things maybe are slowing down a little more on the defense side of things, but Israel is still a huge trading partner of ours. India. Huge opportunity in India. India is going to be the world power next to America, right? It's not going to be China in 20 years. It's going to be India. China's population is getting crushed. They're dropping rapidly. They're making all these aggressive investments in technology and defense because they know they're not going to have the people to sustain where they are today. India's population is booming. Not only is their population booming, but they're an ally of America. They prize education and professional development. And I think right now, half of India's population has now surpassed China, and half of it is under the age of 28. Think about that. Now, I don't know what that means for your business, whether you're a banker or you sell donuts, but that's an amazing opportunity with an ally, a partner of this country, and an opportunity if you're going to look overseas. But you have to, internationally, it's becoming more of a world economy every day, right? But internationally. And then finally, AI. We're always going to, I think we have an opportunity to keep bringing people into New Hampshire. And it doesn't have to be AI. Maybe that was a bad way to start. What investments can you make with that cash today to make sure you can do more with less people? That's just the way of the world, the way it's going. This generation is having less kids later in life, right? So, and I don't know what's going to happen on the immigration side. I mean, we need immigration reform so we can actually get workers, believe it or not. Now, you can't get workers with this mess going on with immigration, but we're not growing our own people like we were anymore. So the opportunity with your cash is, okay, I'm going to buy this piece of software. I'm going to buy, this widget, whatever it is, so I can do more with less people. And you're already seeing it in some of the larger industries like fast food, right? McDonald's is making more burgers and selling more burgers and all that with more technology, more kiosks, more, doing more things online, whatever it might be. So we're not going to see a big surge in folks coming back into the workforce. The people that are in the workforce are in the workforce. And it's getting much better, right? Our unemployment's at, 3%, maybe under 3%. That's not bad. I would never say I want to see unemployment to go up, but it will be healthier at 3%, right? So the sign that it's going up a little means that folks are looking at a little more mobility. I can tell you at the state level, we're hiring a lot more people, which is great. We're filling a lot more vacancies. But that really is going to have its limits, and so I would look at making investments to be successful and profitable without the people coming through the door.
In the few minutes that we have left, you had a unique experience in presidential politics. This week, Nikki Haley stepped out, and you were in lockstep with her. I don't know that I've ever seen an ally more passionate for his candidate than I saw with you, with the energy, with the miles traveled. How was that experience? How do you feel about how it sort of turned out for this week? And I'm curious your unique perspective on the dynamic between in the Republican Party, the Trump-supporting dynamic versus those who don't, and that need for them to start getting along better at some point.
So a couple things. So Nikki was great, and I'm a big believer. If you're going to go in, go all in, right? If you're going to jump in, you got to jump in. And so we had a lot of fun. We pushed hard. We did what no one thought was possible, the whole thing. I didn't think everyone was the fact that but Nikki pushed everyone out of the race even before New Hampshire, that in itself was pretty amazing. But it allowed a real option, an opportunity to happen. And I love that she stayed in through Super Tuesday. It made sure that the party elites in Washington weren't picking our nominee, or just a couple states. You had 25 or so states and territories, the voters, and the Republican voters. And they chose Trump. I wouldn't have done it myself, but they chose Trump. So I'll say this. Yesterday was a great example. I got like 3 or 4 calls on each side, 3 or 4 people saying, by the way, you got to tell, I always get you got to tell Nikki, right? I love those stories. But yesterday you got to tell Nikki, whatever she does, she can't endorse Trump, tell her to stay away, she can't do this, blah, 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 blah. And then I got 3 or 4 people saying, hey, we love Nikki, but you got to make sure she endorses Trump today. She's got to do it. Everyone has their opinions. Nikki's going to do what Nikki does. I think it was a very good speech yesterday, very supportive. She didn't do the Chris Christie thing, which I think was a huge mistake. Go out and try to burn it all down. If you're not supporting me, you're all crazy. No, I mean, that's what Chris did. It was so stupid. Nikki's staying very supportive and saying the exact right thing. Trump has to go earn everyone's vote, and he's got to do it. So whether she endorses or whatever, I don't know. What she does doesn't really matter. She deserves a vacation more than anything. I will say this. For folks who think, the Republican Party is torn apart and blah, 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 I'm super optimistic. I'm really optimistic. I am. And I'll use the line I gave to Politico when I did one of these Q&As with Politico in Washington. Assholes come and go, but our American institutions stay strong. And that's what gives me my optimism. I really believe that. And so what do I exactly mean? Look at what we've gone through, guys. Let's go all the way back to the Civil War. Okay, we went through a civil war. The country was torn apart, but our American institutions stood strong. Our government stood strong, right? People believed in the system. They kept coming out and voting even years later. We went through our 2 world wars. We went through 1968. I mean, I wasn't here in 68, but for those of you that were.
Don't point at me.
I know, sorry. I know, sorry. But really, you had some of the great leaders of America literally assassinated in front of our eyes. And people said, it's over. MLK gets killed, Robert F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy all these great leaders, whether you agreed with them politically or not, are getting assassinated. And everyone said, it's done, America's over, all that kind of stuff. No, we came through. We went through a pandemic, right? We went through 9/11, and our institutions stood strong. So all these people think democracy's over, it's being eroded and all that. Look, you'll have people that, the election deniers on one side and the other. Both sides are equal election deniers. Don't fool yourself on that one and all that. But at the end of the day, our institutions stay strong. We're still the world leader. And if you like Trump, you don't like Trump, eventually Trump won't be here. He's the standard bearer of the party, and he's earned that with the voters at this point. So I got to give him credit there. He's going to run in 24, and right now, if the polls hold up, he's going to win, right? He is. I mean, it'll be a nail biter, but he has a real shot at winning without a doubt. So you can't. Anytime I'm on the press and they say, "Oh, these crazy Trump voters," okay, you just called 54% of America crazy. Like that's your problem. I tell the media all the time, no, that's your problem. You don't understand. Right? You're supposed to be out there understanding the American people and reporting. And what you're saying is, I don't understand anything anymore, right? So Trump is a standard bearer of the party. I don't like his style. A lot of folks don't. A lot of folks that voted for him don't like what he stands for. They don't like his approach. They don't like all the negativity. But they definitely they understand there's an alternative. This is a binary election. You have two choices, right? That any third party isn't going to go anywhere, by the way. But you have two choices here. And a lot of folks don't want this social progressive stuff. You don't even know who's running the show. And that's a real problem for a lot of folks. That being said, at some point, Trump is gone. A lot of folks stick with him out of fear. Most folks stick with him out of fear. That disappears. No one's going to replace that. Why is Trump so popular? It isn't because of what he did as president, right? And I don't want to use popular. Why is he so renowned? Why is he so talked about? Remember, he built up 40 years of publicity in the American psyche before he even ran for president, guys, right? I mean, he was out there. He was this charismatic guy. He was the celebrity guy. He was the developer. He was the brashness, the take on all comers, how he did business. That's 40 years. So when people say, why are you still supporting Trump after being president? There's still something in the American psyche with him. Now, it's hard to break that. It just is. There's a celebrity to that, I suppose, or however you want to say it. But eventually that goes away, and that can't be replaced. It isn't like Trump Light is coming up behind him and everything and going to keep the party kind of fractured. He does keep the party fractured. There's no question about that. But long-term, optimistically, long-term, I think people I feel very good about the Republican Party. I think we'll get back to not exactly where it was, but it'll be a little like what you see in the Democrats. You have the AOCs and the Squad. You have all this anti-Semitic craziness out there. People don't follow it per se. They get their donor base and all that, but that's not leadership. That's not defining the Democrat Party. We'll always have our crazy. They'll have their crazy. We always have, by the way. It's really nothing different. It's just that, one of our more extreme members, and, the extreme part of that became the leader, but that's not going to be followed. It's really not. Remember, Biden on the Democrat side was the most moderate Democrat in that race in 2020. The Democrats chose the most moderate of them all. Trump, on his policies, is not very conservative at all. If you just look at the policies, he's a lifelong Democrat, right? That became a Republican because he wanted to get elected to something. But he's not a fiscal conservative, right? He's become pro-life, I think because it's politically convenient for him, but he was pro-choice his entire life. So on the policies, he's not this extreme conservative. He just has just a horrible abrasive narcissism. The abrasive narcissism is what people, but that's him. So as we get past that, I really feel good that things get quasi back to normal. People voting more in terms of opportunity and less in fear. I think we do that here in New Hampshire really well. We vote for good candidates. We don't vote because we're afraid of the other candidate as much. And I think a lot of states do that. But on the federal side, we don't see as much of that. So no, I feel pretty optimistic.
Good. So,
and America's going to be just fine. We're going to be fine.
I know we're starting to run thin on time. So 4 terms as governor. 3 terms as executive council, right?
Yeah.
So that's
it's like many lifetimes.
Yeah, that's a good.
Don't you guys think you have multiple lifetimes? Like for me, it's. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think I'll just do it.
Where you're going is going to be more interesting.
So the pandemic was its own lifetime, right? And I could write volumes on what happened during the pandemic, and I think we did it really. I think you guys did it really, really well.
Do you think that's your best achievement?
It's hard to call managing a world health crisis your best achievement.
But I mean, I'm talking about what you did in New Hampshire. I know what you're saying.
I'm very proud of the state.
Okay.
I think I'll say this: if you want to give me credit for anything, and there's a Lord knows I'm a politician. I always want credit. We built a great team. I leaned into them. I think we had the right management approach, and then you combine that with the transparency that I think we're able to give, and the interaction with the private sector that we forced to happen. Yeah. And there was a combination of a really good formula there. And I get it. I had to be at the head of it, but I thought it was done. I mean, I think I've told you this before. You know, the discussion we had on, it was almost 4 years now.
Yeah. I know, right?
Not like a birthday you celebrate, but, you know, March 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, those weeks were just awful. And I said to one of those days, I said to the team, okay, we're done. Politically, we are over. I'm never getting elected again. Can we all just own that? Great. Now let's manage. So I did everything I did I knew was likely going to be, I assumed it would be a political disaster, but it was what I believed and what the right thing to do and we're going to manage. And that actually, and it worked. I don't want to say it worked politically, but I got reelected, which is great. So having that approach,
by a record amount, I mean,
yeah, well, you know.
Just saying.
You don't think I would have won by record amounts?
Of course you would have.
No, but that was its own lifetime, and we all experienced it. I mean, I was on TV doing it, but you guys were all, I mean, everyone has a story to tell in the pandemic, a life-changing story. It was just devastating for just so many folks. And then there's that life beforehand. Like when people ask me, we were just talking about bail reform, what happened in 2017, 2018, 2019 in your administration? I'm like,
I don't remember.
I don't know. I gotta remember what we did. It was really good. I mean, I had a Republican-led House and Senate. And the next term, I had a Democrat-led House and Senate. No taxes. You know, never got any. You know, we held strong on what we had. No income tax, which they tried to do. So we held strong on all that. Then the pandemic comes. So I don't know. I don't consider it's. I'm just interrupting your question because I don't look at all my 8 years as governor. It's like 3 different lifetimes, 3 different blocks. Okay. It's like, you know how Tom Brady could have been an MVP in his first 7 years, his second 7 years, or his third 7 years? Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm just like Tom Brady. The first third, the second third, and the third third, I could have been the. No, I'm just kidding. But I do think of it that way. I segment in that, right? Totally. And before that, I was running a ski resort for 6 years, which is his own insanity. That's where I got my. I mean, I got my. You guys also, when I had the ulcer after the pandemic.
Yeah.
Which I earned. I like to say, but when they went, this is really gross, but I'm just going to tell you anyways. So when they went in and said, yeah, you have a horrible ulcer. You almost died, the whole 9 yards. I almost died in Dean Kamen's plane. Have you ever heard that story?
No.
That's a great story.
What time is it? All right,
no,
we still got time.
That's a great story. No, I'm not going to tell that one. I'll save that for the book. But Dean Kamen's a great pilot, by the way, but it was almost a disaster. But they went in and said, oh, no, you've had lots of stresses. One of them was running a ski resort. I mean, the manager that runs Waterville Valley right now, trust me, he ain't having a good day today. And the ulcer is days like this, like, just blow your mind running. In some ways, it was more stressful because I can't control the weather. Right. I think I can, but I can't. And then I was an environmental engineer for many, many years. I worked with my family. I was at MIT. I was down in Washington when my dad was White House Chief of Staff, and I have a whole lifetime of stories when my dad was governor, just growing up in this and trying to use that to make sure my kids come out as normal as possible, like me, because I'm so normal. You know, so I don't know. I segment my life into all these pieces, so I don't look at anything as the journey per se. I just look at it as big steps, and I have no idea what the next step is.
Okay, that answers that question. But
I'll send half of you resumes in the next couple months, probably.
14 years at the State House.
Yeah.
14. That's a run, and
it's
longest-serving Sununu family member in high-profile politics.
Yeah, but again, I don't like to take credit for being the longest serving. My dad's like the longest serving. Should have got out while the getting was good. No, and part of it is again knowing we don't have term limits, but we know our limits, right? It shouldn't be. Public service should never be a career. We talk about that a lot.
But are you going to miss it?
Of course. Oh no, I've talked to all these other governors, and they're like nothing. We say nothing's as good as being a governor, but it isn't because we get all these spoils and benefits. But you really have the opportunity to really impact people's lives, and that's an amazingly fulfilling thing. So it's not, oh, this is the best of times, but I can't imagine any job being as fulfilling as this, with all the stresses, with all the challenges and all of it. And for that, I'll forever be grateful. Now, the downside is this, is I go, look, I'm 49. Have I hit my peak? Shit. It's all downhill from here? Like, oh no, but I accept that. Like Charlie Baker. I mean, Charlie was great governor for 8 years. He went on and took the job. God bless him. I love Charlie. He's the president of the NCAA, which is going through some of the toughest, most challenging transitions that God bless him for trying to manage all that. He's getting paid really well for it. But that's like, I don't know if I want that level of stress next. I want to get back in business, though, I think. I like this media thing a little bit. I like spouting off, as you guys can tell, because I talk too much. So maybe there's I'm not going to be like a talk show host or something, or maybe I will. I know. I don't know why I just dismissed that. That would be great. Do they do talk? There's no more Oprah and Jerry Springer, or is there?
I think
Who does
there's
that?
still some of it. Still
Ellen's
out there.
gone. The View.
Yeah, that's still on.
I'll do a.
So there's
Kelly
morning-
Clarkson.
Yeah.
Is she popular? Okay.
You can be on with her. You can sing.
Kelly and Chris, 10 a.m. every day.
There you go.
No, I don't know.
Perfect.
So I don't know what's next, but I like business. I like helping businesses. I'll tell you this. And one thing I think you guys actually do it pretty well, but let me get back to the economics a little bit. I've had the amazing opportunity to interact with a lot of chairmen and CEOs of huge companies. Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, Ford, Target. I'm bringing those up because they've all walked into political landmines, right, in the past couple of years. And almost all of them have said the same thing. We had no idea. We had no idea this was all going to blow up at us. Like Anheuser-Busch had no idea what was going to happen just because they brought in this transgender influence. They really had no idea and then quickly panicked and didn't know what to do. Coca-Cola. I think the chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola is a great guy. His name's James Quincy. Great guy. He runs a good company. But he said, yeah, we made some decisions that were kind of political down in Georgia. It was barely an afterthought. We didn't really look at it too deeply. And next thing you know, we're getting raked over the coals nationally. And maybe we shouldn't have done it in the whole 9 yards. And yeah, sell Coca-Cola, right? So one thing I have found is there is a lot of very large companies. And as in America, our big companies are getting bigger, right? They're getting more separated. Those boards, those executive decisions are actually getting more and more separated from really what's happening on the ground. And they end up walking into political landmines. I would love to be a consultant or something. I do it for free just to help them avoid political landmines, both conservative and liberal, like on both sides. Sell your product. That's my best message. Avoid politics. Avoid getting dragged into it. Everyone will pull you into it. Everyone will say it's the right thing to do, it's what your customers want, or it's no big deal. And all of them are wrong. Just focus on selling donuts and Coca-Cola and cars or whatever, right? Ford is another good example, right? The chairman and CEO of Ford is a great guy. Fairley's a great guy. And the discussion I had with one of his team was, yeah, the marketing guys kept saying that all these electric pickup trucks were going to keep selling, so we just kept building battery plants. And if you've noticed recently, they're pulling back on their plans to build a lot of these battery plants. And they said, we don't know what happened to the market. I said, well, the problem is, the guy that told you that electrification of pickup trucks was the way to go in 2015 is the same guy you asked in 2021, 2022. He has no incentive to change his mind, to tell you differently, because he'd have to admit that he was wrong, right? So keep looking at things. Don't accept the status quo with your marketing guys, with your data. Always challenge yourself to look a little deeper at whatever you're trying to get at. And I like mixing things up a lot, and I think companies need to mix themselves up, but it's amazing the political landmines and the bad decisions that these people should be really smart and know more than any of us are making. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. I don't know whether it's for me or just other folks, but that's my message to you guys. Just stay focused on your product. Do good banking. Don't get into. I'm in politics. It sucks. Stay out of it. Stay out of it. Chambers of Commerce are great because they keep the economy going. If the economy's working, all this other opportunity happens for the state. Mental health, opioids, all of it. So your success is the first domino that has to fall for the state to be successful.
Governor, on behalf of the Chamber, I want to thank you for your time, for sitting down and meeting with us. Nobody left, and I ran 5 minutes over. My apologies. And on behalf of this group, we hope that you have not yet found your peak.
There we go.
Thank you,
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.